When did your neighbor's petty annoyances turn into a wedding-ruining scheme? AITA for suspecting my neighbor is trying to ruin my life, and then finding out he's actively trying to ruin my best friend's wedding. I literally just found out the most insane thing and I am physically shaking. Send help and maybe a Talenti gelato. I don't even know where to start with this, honestly. I'm Daniel Ali 20M, and I'm sitting in my beat-up 2018 Honda Civic in the parking lot of a late-night CVS because I can't look at my apartment right now. My iPhone 14 battery is dying and my screen is cracked, which feels symbolic, you know? Like my life is hanging on by a thread and also needs a very expensive repair. I work at this buzzy, chaotic tech startup downtown. Think open plan office, mandatory daily catered Chipotle bowls, standing desks nobody uses, and everyone pretending to be 10 years older than they are. I'm the junior coder, which means I spend 70% of my time debugging other people's messy code and the other 30% trying not to have a panic attack. I'm also an abuse survivor. Long story, irrelevant for this specific drama, but important context for why I'm maybe a little too prone to seeing betrayal everywhere. Past me was such an idiot for trusting anyone. The core of this nightmare is Janice Coleman 30F and Brian Thomas 21M. Janice is my best friend. She's technically my senior QA lead at the startup, but outside of work, she's basically my life manager. She's brilliant, hilarious, and maybe a little too generous, which is where the financial drain part comes in. Janice has been in a horrible cycle for years, constantly lending money to her flaky family members. She's currently trying to save up for her wedding next month, and she is stressed, like stress acne, stress insomnia, crying on the phone at 3 a.m. stressed. She just paid the venue deposit, which was massive, but she keeps getting hit with unexpected bills. Last week it was a $347 bill from the caterer for some random surcharge, and 2 days before that she had to fork over $85 for a plumber because her kitchen sink backed up. She was telling me she literally had to pull $200 out of her emergency savings just to cover the grocery bill on Tuesday, which clocked in at exactly $43.67 for a sad little haul at Trader Joe's. She's meticulously tracking every penny because she and her fiancé are scraping together the $1,247 monthly rent on their little place in apartment 3B. She is literally the sweetest person, and I want this wedding to happen for her more than anything. Then there is Brian Thomas 21M. Brian is the nightmare next door. He moved in a month ago, right across the hall from me on the 5th floor. We knew each other vaguely from college. We were friendly for maybe 6 months, but things ended bitterly when he tried to take credit for a group project I basically did myself. He's one of those guys who peaked in high school and now tries to recapture that glory by being as loud and messy as possible. He also works at the startup, but he's in marketing, which means he spends his days making stupid TikToks and pretending to know what AI means. He is the definition of a bitter ex-friend. Since he moved in, my life has felt like a very passive-aggressive sitcom. It started small. My Ring doorbell keeps getting suspicious notifications. Nothing major, just Brian walking past apartment 5A at weird hours, staring at the door. Then my packages started disappearing, 3 Amazon deliveries in a week, including the new AirPods I had saved up for. Then the noise. Loud music at 11:47 a.m. on a Tuesday when I am trying to focus on a massive coding sprint for work. When I knocked to ask him to turn it down nicely, I swear, because I hate confrontation, he opened the door wearing a stained hoodie, gave me this greasy smile and said, "Oh hey Daniel, you sound stressed. Maybe you should take some PTO hours." The audacity. I vented all of this to Janice over lukewarm Starbucks lattes on Friday. She, being Janice, immediately tried to mediate. "Daniel, you're projecting because of your past trauma," she said gently. "Maybe he's just loud. He's 21, they're messy." She told me I needed to try the therapy family approach, which is her term for talking things out like mature adults rather than letting paranoia fester. I know, she's too nice. I was done, just done. I felt like I was losing my mind, but Janice insisted I needed to be the bigger person. "Just invite him over for a beer, Daniel," she suggested. "Be neighborly. If he's a jerk, y'all know, but at least you tried." In GL, I hated the idea, but I owed Janice one. She had literally covered the security deposit on this place when I moved in, so I tried the neighborly thing. Yesterday, Saturday, I bit the bullet. I texted Brian, "Hey, noticed we're neighbors. Small world. Want to grab a drink sometime next week?" He triple texted me back almost immediately. Red receipts were on. Brian text, "Haha, a drink, sure man, your place or mine?" Brian text, "Let me know." "I'm actually swamped this week though. Huge launch." Brian text, "BTW, didn't you say you knew Janice Coleman? She's my lead now. Small world, right? She's getting married. Wild." The last text felt weird. Why did he mention Janice so specifically? We barely spoke at work and he certainly wasn't close to her. But whatever, I was overthinking it. We settled on Monday night. I felt physically ill just thinking about having him in my apartment even for 5 minutes. My stomach was doing flips and I stress ate an entire pint of Ben and Jerry's Chunky Monkey. Today, Sunday, was supposed to be a chill day. I was watching Netflix and catching up on my massive inbox of 247 unread work emails. I hate Slack when Janice called me at 5:30 p.m. Her voice was thin and shaky. "Daniel, you won't believe this," she stammered. I wait, what are you saying? She was calling from her parents' house in Westfield, where they were having a low-key wedding planning meeting. "I just got off the phone with the venue coordinator," Janice said, trying to steady her breathing. "The second installment payment is due tomorrow, right? $4,500. Will I go online to double-check my bank balance? I transferred the funds from savings on Friday and there's a problem." My heart started racing. I knew something financial was coming. Janice is usually so careful, but she's been juggling so much lately. "What is it? Did they overcharge you?" I asked, sitting up straight on my IKEA couch. "No, they didn't overcharge me," she whispered. "The account, my dedicated wedding savings account, it's almost empty. Daniel, there's only $12.56 in it." "What, Janice, you just transferred $4,500 in there?" I know, I transferred it Friday morning at 11 a.m. I have the Zelle transaction confirmation, but someone withdrew large chunks of cash over the weekend. 3 separate withdrawals, $1,000 on Friday afternoon, $1,500 on Saturday morning, and another $1,500 this morning, all ATM withdrawals. Did you call the bank? Are you sure it's not a mistake? Janice took a huge, ragged breath. I called them. They confirmed the withdrawals. They said they were initiated with a physical debit card, not a digital breach. Daniel, only 5 people know the PIN and have access to that card: me, my fiancé Mark, my mom, and my 2 sisters. Mark wouldn't do this, Janice. He's literally the most boringly honest man alive. And your family, they're financially draining, but they aren't thieves. I know, she practically wailed. That's why I'm losing it. Who else would have access to my card information? I never use that card anywhere but the ATM near my office, and that was months ago. I felt my stomach drop to the floor. I remembered the red flags, the missing packages, the loud music, the greasy smile, the mention of PTO hours, and the weird texts. The math wasn't mathing until I connected the dots on one tiny detail she had mentioned last week. Janice, wait, when did you last use that card physically? Probably 6 months ago at the 7-Eleven down the street from the office, right before my regular Starbucks run. Why? And who else works at our startup, knows you're getting married, and knows your apartment building layout because he lives directly across the hall from me? Wait, what are you saying? Brian, I hissed. Brian Thomas. Remember when he was flirting with your family at the Christmas party 2 years ago? He asked you about the wedding back then too. He's creepy, Jan, and he is a bitter ex-friend of mine. He's been actively trying to annoy me since he moved in. She started tearing up again. Daniel, he couldn't possibly. He's just a 21-year-old idiot. He wouldn't know my bank details. Did you ever leave that card lying around the office? Silence. The sound of her trying to control her crying was awful. When I was sick with that flu 2 months ago, I was covering my work computer with notes, and I accidentally left my secondary wallet open on my desk when I rushed out on a Friday, she admitted. I had that card in there. It was only out for maybe 5 minutes while I grabbed my coat. Brian was in the cubicle farm cleaning up after himself. Past me was such an idiot for not seeing this. Everything clicked and I saw red. The only thing worse than being manipulated yourself is seeing someone you love manipulated, especially when they're already so financially stressed. Okay, don't panic, I said, trying to be the calm one. I need you to tell Mark to freeze all accounts immediately. We need proof. If Brian is involved, he wouldn't be stupid enough to use his own account, but he is stupid enough to brag. I knew where to look. Brian uses social media like oxygen. He posts every meal, every minor success, every time he thinks he looks cool. I need 5 minutes, I told her. Do not call the police yet. Give me 5 minutes. I slammed my laptop open, my hands shaking so hard I could barely type. I checked Instagram and sure enough, Brian Thomas was living his best life. He posted stories all weekend. New designer sneakers, $900 easily, bottle service at a ridiculously expensive club, and a smug selfie captioned, "Level up weekend, manifested this wealth TBH. I checked the timestamps. The club photos were posted Friday night right after the first $1,000 withdrawal. The sneaker photo was Saturday morning, but that wasn't proof. He could have stolen the money, but I couldn't connect it to Janice's card. I was about to text Janice back when I noticed a tiny pixelated detail in one of his stories. It was a 10-second video of him and his friends doing a terrible dance in a restaurant parking lot. They were standing next to a very specific ATM. I quickly Googled the location of the ATM. It was the exact 7-Eleven near our office building, the one Janice hadn't used in months. Then I found the truly horrific piece of evidence. I went to his public TikTok. He was doing one of those stupid "what I spend in a day" videos. I scrolled back 2 days, finding a draft he had accidentally made public for maybe 30 minutes before deleting it. I watched it 5 times, my jaw literally dropping. It showed him meticulously planning something. He showed a stack of cash, counting it out. He showed himself ordering expensive items online. He showed off the new BMW he keeps talking about affording but clearly can't. And then, I kid you not, the video cut to a wide shot of his computer screen at his apartment. He was on some kind of wedding vendor website. It looked like the one Janice used. The URL was blurred, but I recognized the logo. He was scrolling through the site and then his cursor hovered over a section labeled Vendor Payment Disputes. I squinted, trying to read the tiny text on his screen, enhancing the video until it was grainy but readable. He had submitted a payment dispute on Janice's behalf to her wedding photographer, claiming they had delivered subpar service and demanding a full refund. He was using her full name and her apartment 3B address. He even included a fake, incredibly petty text exchange he fabricated between Janice and the photographer. This wasn't just about stealing cash. This was calculated. This was an attempt at wedding sabotage. He was trying to get the vendor to drop her, wrecking her contract right before the big day, potentially costing her the thousands of dollars she'd already paid them. Why? Because he's a bitter ex-friend who probably thinks she looks down on him because she's successful and happy, and he's stuck being a loud, messy 21-year-old failure. Who knows? I don't even care right now. I felt the rage. I saw red. The physical reaction was intense. My chest got tight, my vision was blurry, and I wanted to scream. I grabbed my keys, threw on a jacket, and ran out the door of 5A. I didn't even lock it. I walked the 10 steps to apartment 5B. I raised my hand to pound on Brian's door. He had to be home. I could hear his ridiculous techno music playing faintly. I was going to confront him. I was going to force him to confess, record it, and then hand everything over to Janice and the police. But then I paused. What if he tried to gaslight me? What if he physically retaliated? He's bigger than I am, and I was shaking too hard to fight. I needed a witness or at least a plan. I remembered my own trauma recovery and the self-talk my therapist drilled into me. Do not confront when emotional. Gather evidence, establish boundaries, secure safety. I lowered my hand and walked straight to the elevator. I got into my car and drove straight here to CVS, texting Janice frantically the entire way. Do not call the police yet. Do not go home. Brian is involved. I have evidence. He's not just stealing the cash. He is actively trying to sabotage your wedding. Call Mark. Get somewhere safe. I am coming to you. I sent her the link to the deleted TikTok video I'd screenshotted. She called me back 27 times in the next hour. I ignored them all, forcing myself to type this out first just to process. I need advice, I need sanity, and I need a massive strategy session with Janice and Mark before we involve the police and HR. This isn't neighbor drama anymore. This is something seriously messed up, and it all revolves around my bitter ex-friend Brian, who lives 10 feet from me. I just pulled up Janice's location on Find My iPhone. She's still at her mom's house. I'm about to start the hour-long drive to Westfield. And right now, as I'm typing this, I just got a text message notification. It's from Brian. Brian text, "Hey Daniel, just checking in about tomorrow night. Bring the beer, right? What kind do you like?" He's pretending nothing is wrong. He has no idea I know. He thinks he's getting away with stealing $4,000 from my best friend's wedding fund and trying to ruin her life. I'm staring at my cracked phone screen, seeing the text from the bitter ex-friend, knowing he is a literal wedding saboteur. And I realize if he's willing to do this to Janice, who is just an acquaintance lead at work, what is he capable of doing to me, his actual former friend who now lives across the hall? I need to decide what to tell Janice and Mark first, the theft or the deliberate wedding sabotage attempt. The sabotage feels somehow worse. What the fuck do I do? And how am I going to face this man tomorrow night? Do I cancel? Do I pretend everything is normal and try to get a confession? Am I going to get fired for exposing him to HR? I'm leaving now. I'll update you all from Westfield. I literally can't breathe. I didn't reply to Brian's text about the beer. That text just sat there mocking me like, hey, I just ruined your best friend's life. What kind of IPA should I bring? I threw my phone onto the passenger seat and started driving toward Westfield. The drive was an hour of pure adrenaline mixed with self-loathing. I hated that I hadn't listened to my gut about Brian sooner. Janice was right. My trauma makes me see betrayal everywhere, but sometimes, the paranoia is justified, and the person across the hall actually is a sociopathic jerk trying to ruin your life. Past me was an idiot for ever trusting him in college, and present me was an idiot for letting him live across the hall. I pulled up to Janice's parents' huge, aggressively neat suburban house just after 7 p.m. Janice was waiting on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, looking smaller and paler than I'd ever seen her. Mark 30M, her fiancé, a man whose resting heart rate is usually 40, was pacing the living room with the kind of stiff-backed fury usually reserved for action movie villains. I didn't even say hello. I just hugged Janice tight. She was shaking. "Did you show him the video?" I asked Mark, skipping the pleasantries. "I watched it 3 times, Mark said, his voice dangerously low. "The TikTok, the withdrawal statements, the fake vendor dispute." Gestured wildly toward the dining room table, which was covered in printouts of bank statements and screenshots. "The catering company called this afternoon about a complaint that didn't even make sense. She didn't call the caterer. Brian did." Janice dropped the blanket and pointed to a specific line on a printout. "He used my full name, Janice Evelyn Coleman, and my correct apartment number 3B. He signed the complaint. Mark A. Peterson, concerned fiancé." "Wait," I interrupted. "He knew Mark's full name and address? How the hell?" "He knows my fiancé's middle initial because Mark is a co-signer on the venue contract," Janice explained, scrubbing her face. "I left the contract out on my desk when I was printing copies last week. I was only gone for maybe 10 minutes. Mark slammed his hand on the table. "He lifted the details off her desk. He stole the card information off her desk. He used the physical card at the ATM near the office where he knew Shed used it before, just so it wouldn't flag as an unusual location. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment thing, Daniel. This was planned." The reality hit me hard. Brian hadn't just swiped cash, he was executing a destabilization campaign. He wanted Janice stressed, financially ruined, and vendorless before the wedding. "Okay. This is why I said don't call the police yet," I explained, pulling up a chair and trying to channel the hyper-focused energy I use when debugging a server crash. "We have the evidence, but we need the confirmation. Brian is smart enough to do this, but he's also stupid enough to brag about it if he thinks he's safe." Janice looked sick. "He invited you over tomorrow night for a beer." "Yes," I confirmed. "He doesn't know I know. He thinks he's smooth. We need to go through with that meeting." Mark immediately vetoed it. "No way, Daniel. He's volatile. You are not going over there." "I have to, Mark. We need audio proof of the motive. If we just show the police a deleted TikTok and a bank statement, he'll claim identity theft or say Janice is framing him or that I fabricated the screenshots. He's good at gaslighting, trust me." Janice nodded slowly. "He's right, Mark. We need him talking. We need him to confirm why he did this." I laid out the plan. "I will go over there at 7 p.m. I will wear my Apple Watch, which has an extremely sensitive mic. I will place my phone on the table recording audio and video discreetly facing a blank wall while I am talking to him. I will casually mention Janice and the wedding, maybe talk about how stressful it is for her. I will get him to confirm he knows about the stolen money, maybe by pretending I'm thinking of lending her money and asking Brian for financial advice. No, it's cheesy, but if he confesses any link, we have him." Mark looked like he wanted to fight Brian himself, but he conceded to the plan. "Fine, but you text me every 15 minutes. If I don't hear from you at 7:15, 7:30, 7:45, I am calling the cops and going over there myself." We spent the next 2 hours scripting the conversation. It felt ridiculous, like we were planning a heist instead of trying to save a wedding, but there was no other option. Janice was a wreck. She kept repeating, "I just can't believe he was doing this," while acting like my friend at work, asking me for advice on presentations. He was literally smiling in my face last Thursday. This is the part that gets me about Brian, the dual life. He wasn't just a petty thief, he was actively enjoying watching Janice crumble. Before I left Westfield, Janice, Mark, and I agreed on the boundaries. No physical confrontation, get the confession, call the cops immediately afterward. They would wait outside the building in Mark's car. And crucially, Janice had already frozen the accounts and started the dispute process with the venue and the bank. I drove back, feeling marginally better because I had a plan, but also feeling profoundly sick knowing I had to look Brian Thomas in the eye tomorrow night. A week went by where I was basically running on 3 hours of sleep and cold brew coffee. I know I said the confrontation was planned for Monday, but I needed to fill you guys in on the fallout of that night because it was insane. Monday, the setup, I worked from home, unable to focus. Every time I heard a noise in the hallway of 5A5B, my heart jumped. I tried to debug a complicated JavaScript file, but all I could see was Brian's greasy smile. Janice texted me at lunch. HR is reviewing the withdrawal claims. Mark confirmed with the venue coordinator that the dispute Brian filed was rejected because the contract specifies arbitration. We lost the $500 retainer fee on the photographer, but we didn't lose the main deposit. Okay, small victory, but $500 gone forever thanks to bitter Brian. The rest of the day was a blur. At 6:45 p.m. I put on my most boring gray t-shirt, activated the audio recording on my phone and double-checked my Apple Watch mic was live. I grabbed a six-pack of Coors Light because Brian is basic and walked across the hall. My hands were visibly shaking. I knocked once. Brian opened the door instantly, looking way too cheerful. He was wearing an expensive-looking new black hoodie, probably paid for by Janice's misery. Daniel, hey man, come in, come in. He gestured into the apartment. His place was exactly what you'd expect. Messy, smelled vaguely of Axe body spray and old pizza, and had a huge flat-screen TV blasting some sports game nobody cares about. Hey Brian, I managed, trying to sound casual. NGL, I was completely freaking out. I handed him the beer. Brought the cheap stuff, hope that's cool. Perfect man, perfect, come sit. I sat on his slightly sticky IKEA futon. My phone was resting on his coffee table, tucked behind a copy of The Art of War. I wish I was joking about the book, and pointing harmlessly at the wall. The Apple Watch was secured. We talked about work for a few minutes. He bitched about his marketing lead. Ironically, someone Janice had recommended, and talked about his visionary new campaign. He kept bragging about the level-up weekend he'd had. Yeah man, I just had a huge breakthrough on my finances, he announced, sipping his beer and leaning back smugly. I'm manifesting wealth, you gotta be smart about moving money around, liquid assets. This was my opening. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. Yeah, about that, I said, trying to sound genuinely concerned and slightly naive. I'm actually stressing about money right now. My friend Janice, you know her, right? Oh yeah, Janice Coleman, he said, nodding. Great girl, stressed out lately, TBH, all that wedding stuff. Exactly, she's getting hit with these random bills, and she told me she had to pull money out of her savings account just to cover groceries. Like it's bad. She's talking about maybe postponing the wedding. I watched his face. He didn't flinch. He just gave this pathetic performance of sympathy. Dude, that's rough, Brian said, taking a massive gulp of beer. Weddings are a drain. I actually tried to help her out last week. My blood ran cold. Help her out? Help her how? I prompted, keeping my voice even. I mean, I didn't help her directly, but I was looking at her vendor contracts, just trying to see if there were any loopholes, TBH, he said, lowering his voice conspiratorially. She was complaining about the photographer. I told her, Janice, you gotta dispute that. Sometimes you gotta ruffle feathers to save money. I leaned in, playing the sympathetic fool. Yeah, I heard she filed a dispute, but the photographer didn't budge. She was super upset because she lost the retainer fee. Brian laughed a short, ugly sound. Oh, she lost the retainer? Well, that's what happens when you don't know the game, man. You gotta hit them where it hurts. You gotta make the dispute look authentic. You gotta use all their details. You gotta leverage the system. He tapped his temple. It's not about being nice, it's about being smart. I felt the rage bubbling up. He was admitting to the sabotage on tape, calling it being smart. She's also freaking out because someone used her wedding savings card, I continued, pushing the boundary. Like $4,000 withdrawn. Mark is going ballistic. They think it's one of her family members, but she doesn't think her sister would do that. Brian took another swig of beer. His eyes, for the first time, looked a little too bright. Look, I'll tell you something, Daniel, man, he slurred slightly. He was drinking fast. Janice is a great person, but she's a pushover. She lets everyone walk all over her. She's the definition of a financial drain. He paused, looking right at me. And you know what? That kind of weakness, it attracts people who want to take advantage. Look at you. You're always fixing her problems. You're always running around for her. You're enabling her. I don't think I'm enabling her, I said, my voice starting to crack under the strain. She's my best friend. She's your lead at work, dude. She acts like your mom, and you know why I know she's a financial mess? Brian sneered, leaning closer. Cause I saw her bank accounts, man, right on her desk. She keeps all her passwords written down on post-it notes. She's too trusting. She thinks everyone is her friend just like you do. This was it, the confession. He wasn't just admitting he saw the details, he was admitting he had access and that he viewed Janice as a soft target. So you saw the pin too, I whispered. Brian gave me that awful greasy smile again. I saw everything. And when someone leaves the door wide open, man, they're basically asking for someone to walk through it. She shouldn't be spending thousands on some stupid wedding when she can barely pay her rent. She needs a wake-up call. He actually thought he was performing a public service. I couldn't handle it anymore. The planned exit script flew out of my brain. I was too mad. A wake-up call. You think stealing $4,000 from her wedding fund and trying to get her vendors to drop her is a wake-up call, Brian? I asked, my voice rising sharply. Brian froze, the smile vanished. His eyes went wide and his color drained instantly. He stared at me like I had just slapped him. What are you talking about? He stammered, instantly defensive. I don't know anything about that money. I told you I was just helping her with the vendors. Don't lie to me, I hissed. I stood up, grabbing my phone and the Apple Watch, making no attempt at subtlety anymore. I saw the TikTok, the deleted draft, I saw you counting the cash. I saw you filming yourself at the 7-Eleven ATM near the office, the only ATM that card had been used at in 6 months. I saw you filing the fraudulent vendor dispute using Mark's name. The denial was gone. The fury instantly replaced it, fueled by panic. You went through my phone. He shouted, jumping to his feet, knocking his beer over onto the sticky futon. You stalked me? That's illegal, Daniel. You're obsessed. You're projecting your trauma onto me. I'm reporting you to the police right now, Brian, I said, backing toward the door. Janice and Mark are outside. We have everything recorded. You just confessed that you targeted her because you thought she was weak and too trusting. You are going to jail. He lunged for me, not to punch me, but to grab my phone. I sidestepped, scrambling back toward the door of 5B. Give me that phone, you little snake, he roared. I managed to yank the door open. Before he could reach me, I was sprinting across the 10 feet of hallway to my own door. 5A, I fumbled the key, jammed it into the lock, and slammed the door behind me. I didn't even bother to lock the deadbolt. I was already halfway down the hall toward the stairwell, running down the 5 flights of stairs as fast as I could, texting Mark and Janice. Gio, I have it, I am out. I burst out of the lobby doors just as Mark's black Tahoe peeled around the corner. I dove into the back seat, gasping for air. Janice grabbed my arm. Did you get it? Are you okay? Yes. He confessed, not explicitly, but he admitted he saw the details and that he thought she was too trusting and that she needed a wake-up call. He tried to grab the phone, I choked out. Mark, already on the phone with 911, looked over his shoulder at me. You stay in the car, Daniel. I told them exactly what happened. They are sending a patrol car right now. We waited for what felt like 3 years. The aftermath, Tuesday morning, the police arrived about 15 minutes later. They were professional but skeptical until Mark handed them the bank statements, the vendor dispute printouts, and the audio files I had just emailed him detailing Brian's smug commentary. They went upstairs. We waited downstairs. It was excruciating. About an hour later, 2 officers escorted Brian out of the building in handcuffs. He was yelling, absolutely screaming obscenities about me being a stalker and Janice being a sucker. He looked pathetic, stained hoodie and all. He saw me in Mark's car and yelled, "You're going to regret this, Ali. HR is going to fire you for harassment." I leaned back against the headrest and closed my eyes, trying to block out the sound. He was arrested on charges of grand larceny and fraud. Mark drove us back to Westfield. I spent the night at Janice's parents' house, feeling completely drained but safe. Tuesday, the HR nightmare. The next morning, Janice and I called out of work. Mark, who works in logistics for an unrelated company and is thankfully uninvolved in our startup, insisted on driving us downtown. We walked into the buzzing open-plan office and the silence was immediate and thick. Coworkers had clearly already heard something. Gossip travels at the speed of light in a tech startup that caters Chipotle. We went straight to HR. The HR manager, a woman named Sharon who looked perpetually exhausted, was already waiting for us. Janice, Daniel, thank you for coming in, she said, managing a weak smile. We were already made aware of the police involvement this morning. We are placing Brian Thomas on immediate unpaid leave pending investigation. We are treating this situation with extreme seriousness. Janice handed over a succinct summary of the charges, the bank statements, and crucially the fact that Brian had used work time resources, his work computer screen shown in the TikTok draft, to plan the vendor sabotage. Sharon's expression went from tired to horrified. Then came the complication, exactly what Brian had yelled about. Daniel, Sharon began, looking uncomfortable. While we understand the extreme circumstances, Brian has filed a counter-complaint this morning claiming workplace harassment, stalking, and invasion of privacy based on the recording you obtained in his private residence. I felt my heart sink. But he was stealing from her. He literally confessed his motive. We know and we are working with our legal team to review the legality of the recording, Sharon said carefully. For now, because you live in the same building and have a history of conflict, we need to place you on administrative leave as well, Daniel, until the investigation is complete and safety measures are guaranteed. Administrative leave. Unpaid. I was relying on this job. This was a massive setback. I looked at Janice and her face mirrored my despair. Are you serious? He steals $4,000, tries to destroy my wedding, and Daniel is punished for exposing him. Janice demanded, her voice shaking with controlled fury. It is temporary, Sharon insisted. We need to ensure safety for both parties and adhere to policy. You will both be required to attend a mandatory mediation session with me once the legal issues are clearer. I suggest you retain legal counsel, Daniel. This is beyond typical coworker drama. I walked out of HR feeling utterly defeated. Brian hadn't just attacked Janice, he had successfully used the system to retaliate against me. I need to move, I whispered to Janice in the elevator. I can't live across the hall from that guy even if he's in custody. He'll be out on bail soon. Fast forward to Friday. Brian was out on bail. He had texted me 47 times from a burner number, calling me every name imaginable and threatening to ruin my credit score if I didn't delete the evidence. I blocked him on everything and changed my apartment door code. I couldn't afford to move immediately. The stress was making me physically ill. I was barely eating and my coding skills had completely vanished. I spent the entire weekend stress eating ice cream and fielding calls from concerned family members and judgmental friends. Janice, seeing my distress and knowing I couldn't afford the HR-mandated unpaid leave, stepped up, and this is where her character development actually started. She and Mark came over Saturday morning. You're not staying here, Daniel, Janice said firmly, holding a huge cardboard box. It's not safe and you need to focus on yourself, not on watching the hall. I can't afford new rent right now, I protested, pointing to my savings account, which was looking dangerously low. We talked to my parents, Janice replied. They have an empty condo near the coast. It's tiny, but it's empty. It's yours for 3 months, rent-free, no arguments. Consider it repayment for the security deposit you helped with and frankly for saving my wedding. I started crying, not just the quiet, stress crying, but ugly, shaking sobs. I can't take that much from you, Janice. I told you I hate being a financial drain. Janice sat beside me on the futon. Stop. This isn't draining, Daniel. This is setting a healthy boundary for your safety, and this is me finally being the stable friend you need instead of the friend I need. The therapy family resolution approach. This is the part where Janice's therapy family approach finally worked, but not in the way she originally intended. A week later, I was moved into the tiny, sterile condo in Long Beach. It was quiet, and the change of scenery was already helping my anxiety. Janice, Mark, and I held a formal three-person therapy family session over Zoom. Not only did we discuss how to proceed legally against Brian, but we talked about how this whole crisis had exposed cracks in our relationships. Daniel, you have to stop internalizing betrayal, Janice started gently. Your default setting is to wait for the knife. You need to use your amazing intuition, but you need to trust us. And Janice, I countered, feeling safe enough in the controlled environment to be blunt, you have to stop thinking the world is nice. You are too generous. You are financially draining yourself by constantly trying to fix everyone's problems, which makes you a soft target for manipulative jerks like Brian. You left your sensitive banking information exposed because you were too busy taking care of everyone else. She teared up, but she didn't argue. I know. My family financial issues have been going on for years, and I realize I transfer that codependency to everyone, even you. I apologize for suggesting you were projecting trauma instead of seeing the obvious red flags Brian was waving. It was a huge, difficult moment. Janice admitted her role in creating a vulnerable environment, and I admitted that my instinct to retreat and assume the worst wasn't always helpful. But I needed to listen to the evidence when it was right in front of me. Mark mostly sat there, the stable center, confirming that they had both started couples counseling focusing heavily on financial boundaries. 3 days after that, the startup HR situation finally stabilized. My lawyer pro bono, arranged through Janice's dad, confirmed that since the recording was made in my apartment complex hall involved in active crime theft and was necessary for safety, it was admissible, but the HR department was terrified of a lawsuit. Final verdict, Brian was fired immediately. Full termination, no severance. HR sent me a remarkably stiff and cold email confirming this. I was reinstated and backdated for the administrative leave pay with a mandatory WFH arrangement until I felt safe returning to the office. Janice got a formal apology from the company, though no monetary compensation for the lost retainer fee. The financial reality, Brian, predictably, refused to repay the $4,000. He had spent it all on the sneakers, the club, and probably the down payment on that ugly BMW he keeps talking about. Janice and Mark sued him in civil court. It was lengthy and TBH, it was depressing. Brian claimed bankruptcy typical, but the judge issued a repayment order anyway. Janice will likely see that money back in tiny, painful installments over the next 20 years, if ever. The wedding, thankfully, is still on, although it's now a slightly scaled-back affair because they lost the $500 retainer and had to buy new rings after they felt the need to replace the ones they'd been saving in a safety deposit box for fear Brian would target them next. They are scraping by, but they are doing it together, without lending money to Janice's flaky cousin for the 5th time this year. Update: this morning I showed up at my old door. I had to go back to the old apartment to officially end my lease and pick up the last of my mail. I saw Brian's mom in the hallway. She had flown in from Ohio to clean out his apartment, 5B. She looked exactly how you'd picture, worn out, defensive, and wearing a lot of beige. She saw me coming out of 5A and immediately rushed over. Daniel Ali, I believe, she said, hands on her hips. My son tells me you framed him. You are a terrible person for what you did to my boy. He's just 21, he made a mistake. I stopped right there, pulling my keys out, establishing that boundary Janice and my therapist had drilled into me. Your son stole $4,000 from my friend's wedding fund and actively tried to sabotage her life and career out of petty jealousy, I said, keeping my voice low and firm. He is facing grand larceny charges. This wasn't a mistake, it was calculated malice. Please don't contact me again. I unlocked the deadbolt and went into 5A. I left her standing there, completely speechless. It felt like a small, necessary victory. I didn't get angry, I didn't argue, I just stated the fact and walked away. That is massive growth for the old me, the one who would have folded under the pressure. Final reflection: it's been about a month since Brian was hauled away in handcuffs. I'm typing this from my new apartment, the tiny one by the coast. It's basically a shoebox, but the rent is zero for now and I can hear the ocean. I still work remotely for the startup, thankfully. The thought of running into Brian at the office terrifies me even though he's gone, so I'm enjoying the WFH for now. The group chat is still buzzing, but the focus has shifted from OMG, Brian is insane to Janice and Mark are going to have the strongest marriage ever. I still have bad days where I feel the paranoia creeping in. Yesterday, the UPS guy delivered a package to the wrong door and I immediately panicked, thinking Brian was somehow back, still monitoring me. I had to call Janice and she talked me down. The therapy family approach, it worked, but not in the soft kumbaya way Janice envisioned. It worked because the crisis forced all of us to set hard, brutal boundaries. Janice finally cut off her family members who were financially draining her. She's in therapy and she trusts Mark implicitly now, and me. I learned the difference between healthy suspicion based on evidence and projection based on trauma. I realized I'd been ignoring red flags for months because I was afraid of the confrontation. I still owe Janice big time for the apartment and I'm stressing about how to pay her back, but she told me just focus on breathing the ocean air, Daniel. Your only job right now is to stop being stressed. I'm eating ramen every day, but I'm sleeping peacefully, so it's totally worth it. I'm focusing on my code, and honestly, the silence of not having techno music blasting across the hall at 11:47 a.m. on a Tuesday is the best feeling in the world. So am I the AITA for exposing my neighbor who was actively trying to sabotage my best friend's life? No. But I certainly complicated my own life in the process. It wasn't a clean resolution. The money is mostly gone, the civil suit is going to drag on forever, and I lost my ability to work physically in an office for the foreseeable future. But I have my best friends back and my boundaries are titanium strong now. Yesterday Janice and I were talking and I actually laughed at a stupid TikTok. Not one of Brian's awful ones, but one about a cat trying to steal a sandwich. And I realized I am gonna be okay. We'll update if anything else insane happens, like if Brian shows up at the Long Beach condo. But I changed my name on my doorbell just in case. TBH, I think the worst is over, I hope.